Welcome to the ACS podcast family.
We're your hosts, Angie and Charlene.
Where every week you can find new material centered around your life.
Thanks for joining us on our journey. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 1. We are going to take some time each month to talk to you about topics that are relevant to your life. We're going to start off this month in August talking about perception. But before we get started on that, let's take a few minutes to talk about who we are and how this podcast came to be. So let's start with you, Angie. Why don't you tell us about you?
Hey everyone, my name's Angie and I'm a life coach. I primarily focus on helping people in relationships, improve the relationships that they're in, develop new relationships, develop the social skills that they need to get the relationships, or, even in the workplace, helping with relationships with coworkers, friends, families, stuff like that. Really helping people bridge the gap between where they're at and where they want to be in that area of their life. And what about you, Charlene?
So I am a life and business coach focusing primarily on parenting, networking, and property management. So starting with the parenting, so talking about, where you came from and what's going on with your kids and how you can relate to your kids. Networking, which is how we met. So I'm excited to talk about that in a second. And then property management. So my background on that for the last, I don't want to say how many years because it'll age me. And I'm sure in this podcast I sound young. How many years that I spent in that and how I can help the service industry with property management. But let's talk about networking a little bit. So we met at a networking event.
Yes.
And then we developed our relationship past that by having some one-on-one time and talking, which is how this whole podcast was born.
Absolutely. We just met for coffee one day just to catch up because we don't see each other as much anymore. And so sat down for coffee and just got to talking, and one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, this wonderful idea was born that we're both so very excited about.
Yeah. A few hours later, a cup of coffee and microphones were ordered. And here we are.
I believe one of the things we said is we looked down at the clock and we're like, 4 hours later, maybe we should leave the coffee shop.
Right. And start recording this for all of you to hear. So that is just a little bit about us. Let's just jump into our topic, which is perception.
Yeah, absolutely. Perception is huge, and perception is our reality, right? That's a quote. And really what we perceive to be is the reality that we're living in, but everybody perceives things differently.
So even as we're sitting here talking about this, and although I think we're both on the same page of how awesome this is, we can have totally different views on how this recording went, how our planning's going, how everything's going. I mean, I think it's amazing, but what do you think? Because we don't think the same.
Right. I think it's totally amazing too, but have you ever been in a situation where people don't think the same way as you or aren't getting the same sensory input that you're getting?
Absolutely. I actually love the story that you told me once about a parade. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So there was a dad who took his son to a parade, and during the parade there was lots of different things going on, and the dad noticed all kinds of different stuff going on. This was in a book somewhere. I don't really remember which book off the top of my head, but he was talking about it, and then they got home and the father was talking to the son about it, and all the son saw was the trucks. He didn't see the parade. He didn't see the people. He's like, wow, I want to go see more trucks. And in the parade there were some trucks, but that's not what the dad had noticed. And so just looking at the difference between what the dad noticed and what the son noticed was there was a big difference between that.
I can even thinking about, on Sundays we go to church together as a family, and I hear the same pastor that my kids do, all of them sitting in a row, and we'll get in the car and I'm like, oh guys, how was church? Like, what did you get out of it? And my 6-year-old's like, Jesus is amazing. Like, he's awesome and he loves me even when I mess up. And I heard, like, God has this purpose for me and I'm supposed to be on this journey, and even if I'm not following the right path, he's going to pick me up and put me there, so I might as well just do what I'm being told to do. And my 19-year-old is like, God said enjoy your life, that he's got everything. Like, just go do it and be excited about it. And I'm like, were we in the same room? Because I really feel like you guys just made that up in your head. I didn't hear any of that today. And it's that every week. And it's that perception of what's going on. And if we take it into business, like let's talk about sales. So, and our networking and how we are, where if we have a person that we're networking with that then becomes closer to us, and then they're a friend. Mm-hmm. And how do you then value your business or sell your business to a friend? Because your perception of that relationship then is that they're a friend. Like, what happens if you mess up?
Right. And that, that gets hard too, because you network to grow your business, to get referrals, to build those relationships up. And then you do that. And then you have this perception of what your friend thinks and what your friend is feeling. And you feel like your friend is going to come and give you business if that's what they want to do. But right. You and I were just talking a little bit ago about how you still need people to ask for business.
Right.
Even if it's something that what your friend does, but they still need to ask you for business based on the way that you are, which is completely different than the way that I am, because in my experience, I would like to build that relationship with someone, and when I need something, personal development, services included, whether I'm going to the store to buy clothes or whatever it is, I'm going to buy when I'm ready, and I don't like that high pressure sales environment, and I walk away from that. And then it results in no sales. However, if you just keep that relationship building with me, kind of keep in front of my face, then eventually, without pressuring me, without asking for the sale, then eventually I'm going to become a lifelong customer. And I think that's so interesting because as we were talking, I said, mm-hmm. I think you think what I think earlier, but you have a completely different take on that.
Right. Well, first, I'm against high pressure sales altogether. Like, that's awful. But I need somebody to try to sell me. Like, for example, if I needed your coaching and you're listening to me talk and you're like, I can help you. In your head, your perception of this is, I can help you, but I don't want to sell to you. I'm just going to keep building this relationship. I'm over here in myself going, please ask me. Please ask me so I can give you my money, because I am too proud to just go, I need help. Like, it's we're sitting next to each other having these same conversation, but our internal conflicts are so different because of the perception of what the other person may or may not be thinking.
Right. So what we're going to talk about some this month, a little bit later, is to put down those expectations on other people and to kind of follow some of your intuition, but to really drop those expectations, because mm-hmm. putting expectations on other people or projecting your fears on those other people can really have a limiting effect on us in our businesses, in our careers, in our relationships, and in any other area of life that you can think about.
So perception can affect so many different things. Like we just talked about, it can perceive what you see, what you feel, what you hear. Like it can perceive just everything. Perception is everything.
It is. You were talking about things that you hear in church and the way that is. So another thing, talking about the way that sight is, I know that I quoted an example from a book, but Damon and I went down to San Diego, California a couple of years ago, and we're out driving around, and I swear, all I can see is red flowers. They are everywhere. They're on the side of the roads. They're under the overpasses. They are up by the houses. There's bushes. They're everywhere. I can't not see them. And so I decided that I'm going to ask, because Damon grew up there. He used to live there. He should know what those flowers are. Right? Because they're everywhere. So I ask him, and he looks at me, straight face, and he's like, what red flowers? Like, right. How do you not see them? And then I pointed him out, and he's like, oh, yeah, they kind of are everywhere. But we see what we're paying attention to. And at that point in my life and where I was at and what I was taking in with my new environment and surroundings, I was really looking at the landscaping. I was really looking at what was going on down there as we were close to the ocean, and it was a place that I hadn't been to, and how does it compare to Los Angeles? So I was really ingrained and really focused on what was going on in the landscaping, whereas he wasn't so much, because he knew what to expect because he had lived there before. So he was paying attention to all the places and seeing what had changed since he had grown up. And so it was really interesting to see the different perceptions on that. But just in what we see, what we hear, what we smell, it all comes from the way that we were raised. It all comes from past experiences that we have in our lives. And it's super helpful to remember that not everybody has the same experience that we did.
Right. So let's see, what other kind of perceptions? So we've got hearing at church. We've got seeing on your trip. What's another thing of perception that, I guess how you feel, right? We're perceiving how we feel. What if we talked about walking into a networking group and, how that person feels walking in, not knowing anybody, seeing all of these people around and looking, desperately for somebody to make eye contact with, like, who are you? What's going on? And when you walk in that room, are you that person who's desperately looking, or are you that person who's like, I am here and I want to talk to everybody, and same, two new people feeling two totally different ways.
And that feeling can translate over to a lot of different things. And a lot of times that comes back to self-confidence and self-worth and the experiences that we've had growing up, and whether we're an introvert or an extrovert. And empathy is such a powerful tool that a lot of us don't fully understand or grasp. And what happens is, again, we get caught up in that I think, you think, what I think. We intellectually know that some people are introverts and some people are extroverts. We know that some people like crowds and some people like, more intimate gatherings or one-on-one contact. But at the same time, when we walk into a room, we feel that other people are going to feel the way that we do.
Right.
And so kind of stepping back from that and removing that will allow you to make new connections, because you can sit back and actually empathize or ask another person what they're feeling, or help somebody who looks a little bit scared be more comfortable if we recognize that not everybody feels the way that we feel.
Exactly. So that's great, talking about in a networking setting or how we might perceive things with strangers. But even if we were to bring it home and how we parent and how our kids perceive how we're parenting. So with 4 little people at home and a rotating crew that comes in with our foster care, how our kids perceive what we're saying is totally different than how we think we're saying it. So with all 4 of my kids, I have to parent them very differently, because I have one child who, if I said, don't do that, and I said it just like that, she is like on the verge of tears that I'm utterly disappointed in her. And all I'm telling her is to, at that time she was younger, don't stick your finger in the electrical socket. And it was simple as that. Where then if we went to my next child that was after her, and I said, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And then I literally have to physically move him away, because he thinks that my don't do that is just like a maybe that's not a good idea, where he's ready to just stick a pencil sharpener or whatever it is into the electric socket. And the perception of that I'm parenting 2 children that I have grown up in the same environment, so they have been, same morals, same values, same everything, and how they perceive my words so differently. And taking that perception, I think, and wrapping it all the way around is not even our kids, but our neighbors' kids and how everybody else is like, they all perceive words and talking and yelling loudly. Are you yelling or are you screaming? Like, is there even that fine line, and how you perceive that with your kids?
That is so very true. And thinking about that, there is a lot of stigma around being fair with your children or parenting the same, and realizing that people are individuals. Nothing against the school system, nothing at all, but we send kids to school and they get put in a box, and and we keep them boxed up. And so we do that at home too. We put our kids in a box and we say one size fits all. So if I'm going to parent this way, I parent all of my children this way.
Right.
And that doesn't always work, because just like adults, kids are individuals and they all have their own personality.
Right. It's so hard, and it's so good. We parent very unfair in our house. I'm told all the time, I'm very unfair. That's okay. I'm good. But that perception is key. So, and being empathetic, like we just talked about briefly, to each child. So each child needs to, how do they need to be talked to? How do they need to be loved? And how do you be empathetic?
Well, and one of the biggest keys is to get curious and ask. A lot of times, especially when we're parenting, but with coworkers, with people that we associate with whatever, we feel like the words that we're saying are so very clear, and that everybody should understand what we're saying, when that's not always true. And a much more effective tool, rather than just repeating yourself over and over again, is to ask, well, why? What do you hear me saying? What are you taking away from this? Why are you doing that? Trying to understand the why questions will help you understand where they're coming from. Clarifying questions, could you repeat that back to me? What did you hear me say? Especially with your children, will help you understand also where they're coming from, but how they're interpreting you versus maybe why they're doing something, which is another way to get inside somebody's head and show empathy for it. Because most people have a reason for what they're doing when they're doing something, and most people don't intend to cause anyone else harm, but they may not be seeing how their actions are affecting other people. And by us getting curious instead of being offended is a great way to start mending some of those fences or building some bridges or being able to relate to other people in a way that we haven't before.
For sure. I love what you just said about having your kids repeat it back. So that is something that we do in our house quite often. And 2 different children, so have enough, we'll talk about them all. I'll say something like, for example, hey, you got to get your chores done and then you can go play, do whatever you want to do. One kid will hear exactly what I said. Do my chores and I get to go play. The other kid hears, you can't do anything until you get your chores done, so you can't do anything today at all because you have too many chores to do. And I'm like, how did that happen? Where in the world did you come up with the world is over because you have 2 chores to do? And all I said was the same thing. And it is totally that. And getting them to repeat it back and hearing that they heard something totally different, just a game changer. Stop, take a step back. What did I say? And that you perceived it that way. And that perception of stopping yourself, I think.
And so I think that goes into a great point, and something that I think we're going to talk about quite a bit next week is expectation, right? Because we expect other people to understand what we're saying. We expect other people to behave in the way that we want them to. We expect other people to do the things that we want them to. And then we end up disappointed, we end up frustrated, we end up angry when that doesn't happen. But we don't take a step back to evaluate why that happened or dig into what perceptions led to that or what reality or what the other person was thinking or going through when they did it. I mean, maybe something that hurts us was something that they were trying to do to help somebody else. And just even figuring that out, you can feel less hurt by whatever situation is coming up.
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait for next week.
So don't forget to tune in and come listen to us next week so that you can understand more about how we set expectations on people and what we can do to change our perception of those expectations.
We're going to be releasing new podcasts every Monday. So don't forget to subscribe so that you can hear everything that's going on with the AC family.
Yes, and thanks so much for listening.